Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. So glad you're joining us today. We're kicking off a brand new series, and I've got to tell you, it's something I've been wanting to talk about for a long, long time. We're calling it Where Did We Go Wrong? A deep, honest, and hopefully, ultimately, a very hopeful look at the decline of Christianity in the UK and what we can learn, crucially, from the ancient story of Israel, specifically from the book of Judges.
The title itself is pretty provocative, isn't it? Where did we go wrong? It implies there's a problem we need to face, which I think is a really brave starting point for a series like this.
Absolutely. And before anyone out there starts to panic thinking this is going to be all doom and gloom, I want to be super clear. It's actually the opposite. This series is about clarity, it's about hope, and it's about rebuilding. Because, honestly, what I've learned over years of talking to pastors, sociologists, young adults, and church leaders across the UK is this. We can't fix what we won't face, and we definitely can't heal what we won't name.
That's so true. It's like trying to navigate a forest without admitting you're lost. So today, we're diving straight into that big foundational question. Where did we go wrong? How did one of the most historically Christian nations on earth become arguably one of the most secular? I mean, it's a huge shift, and it feels like it happened almost without us noticing.
Yeah, it really does. And to set the scene, let's just start with some numbers. I promise they won't hurt, but they are pretty stark. In the 2021 census, for the very first time in history, less than half of people in England and Wales identified as Christian. We're talking just 46%. That's a dramatic drop from 59% in 2011 in just a decade. Think about that.
And church attendance, even lower. I mean, significantly lower. In most cities across the UK, fewer than 5% attend church regularly. When you consider the historical context of Britain, those figures are just staggering. They represent a fundamental reshaping of our national identity, really.
Totally. And then, when you ask people under 25 if Christianity means anything to them, you often get this long pause, or a confused shrug, or, and I've heard this so many times, isn't that the thing my nan believes? Does that sound familiar to anyone listening? Because it certainly does to me.
It speaks volumes about the disconnect. It's not an active rejection for many, but a complete irrelevance. Like a language they never learned, or a story they were never told.
And here's the twist, and this is where the hope starts to come in, I think. This is not the first time God's people have faced a generational collapse of faith, not by a long shot. Because in the book of Judges, we read something truly remarkable and honestly a little bit chillingly familiar.
Yeah, after Joshua's generation, this incredible generation that saw miracles, they crossed the Jordan River on dry land. They marched around Jericho and saw the walls fall. Listen to what happened next. Judges 2:10 says, and I'm quoting directly here, "Another generation grew up who knew neither the Lord nor what he had done for Israel."
Just imagine that for a second. One generation experienced God's power, saw him move in undeniable ways. The very next generation, their children and grandchildren, forgot him entirely, or at least didn't know him in any meaningful way. It makes you pause, doesn't it? Does that sound a bit like the UK today? I think it really does. Let's dig deeper into that ancient story for a minute.
Let's take a quick trip back to ancient Israel. Picture this. Israel has finally settled in the land God promised them. They've gone from constant struggle, from wilderness living, from being nomads, to stability, to having farms, families, relative peace. Life becomes comfortable, predictable even.
And that's exactly the moment, ironically, when things start to slip. Faith becomes assumed. It's just part of the furniture. The powerful, miraculous stories of God's faithfulness stop being told with passion and urgency. Parents get busy, distracted by the day-to-day comforts of their settled lives. Children grow up learning the routines, the rituals, the festivals, but not the vibrant living relationship with the God behind them.
So one day a new generation rises who knows the festivals, they know the gatherings, they know the traditions, but they don't know the God. It wasn't a rebellion, was it? It wasn't a dramatic turning away. It was neglect. It wasn't some dramatic overt sin that caused the collapse. It was just slow forgetting. And that's how decline always begins, isn't it? Quietly, almost imperceptibly.
That's such a crucial point. It's the subtle erosion, not the sudden earthquake, and the parallels with the UK are almost uncanny.
Exactly. Let's think about a UK history lesson that maybe you didn't ask for, but I think we really need. Let's rewind to the 1950s. If you walk through London, Birmingham, Manchester, Sundays were different. Shops were closed, streets were quiet, churches were absolutely buzzing with activity. Christianity was just woven into the cultural fabric of the nation.
It was the air the nation breathed, as you said earlier. People weren't always passionately, personally Christian, you know? But Christianity was the default. It was the background radiation of society, defining holidays, values, expectations.
Yeah, completely. Now, fast forward a few decades. You have the sexual revolution, the rise of individualism, where personal choice became paramount, the breakdown of extended families, which traditionally played a huge role in passing on faith, consumerism pushing a different kind of gospel, secular education becoming the norm, the decline of traditional church authority, often exacerbated by scandals or just a perceived irrelevance.
And most recently, digital culture. All of these factors reshaped Britain's values, shifted priorities, and fundamentally changed the landscape. Christianity didn't disappear overnight, it simply stopped being central. It was pushed to the periphery, almost gently in a lot of ways.
Just like Israel in Judges, the shift wasn't sudden, was it? It happened slowly, quietly, generationally, like a tide slowly receding without anyone noticing, until the beach is suddenly much, much smaller.
That's a fantastic analogy. And to help us really understand this, I recently had the privilege of speaking with Dr. Joanna Reid. She's a sociologist, a brilliant researcher, and a specialist in religious change in Western cultures. I wanted to get her take on this slow generational shift. Here's a bit of our conversation.
Dr. Reid, people often think Christianity in the UK collapsed instantly, like a building suddenly falling down. But your research suggests something quite different, right? That it's been more of a gradual erosion.
Yes, absolutely. What we're experiencing today is definitely the result of a slow, multi-generational shift. If you look at the historical data, the decline really begins not in the 2000s, as many people assume, but actually as far back as the late 19th century. However, the acceleration, the point where it became undeniably noticeable, certainly happened after the 1960s, which is when we observe a significant change in how families approached faith. They simply stopped treating it as something to intentionally pass on, to actively teach their children.
Wow, so you're saying Christianity didn't necessarily fail in the pews, or primarily in the pews, but it actually failed more profoundly in the living room, in the home.
Exactly. That's a very accurate way to put it. Faith transmission is strongest, most resilient, when it's practiced and modeled at home. When families stopped praying together, stopped reading scripture, stopped discussing their faith openly, stopped modeling what a Christian life looks like day to day, churches alone simply couldn't fill that gap. And by the 1990s, you had 2 or 3 generations who had grown up without much Christian exposure at all. It just wasn't part of their daily landscape.
Which, when you think about it, sounds exactly like that verse from Judges 2:10, doesn't it? Another generation grew up who knew neither the Lord nor what he had done for Israel.
Yes, the pattern is strikingly similar. Faith lost not through some dramatic hostile rebellion, but through simple forgetfulness, through a lack of intentional passing on. It's a very subtle, yet incredibly powerful dynamic.
That's such a profound observation. It really makes you think about what we prioritize in our homes today. Are we inadvertently doing the same?
Right? It's deeply challenging. And I want to pause here and just talk to you, the listener, heart to heart for a minute. Whether you're a young adult, a parent, a pastor, or somewhere in between, here's the uncomfortable truth. Christianity in the UK didn't just decline because culture changed. While culture certainly plays a role, and it's a huge factor, it also declined because we, as the church, as Christian families, we didn't pass it on effectively.
We assumed too much. We assumed our children or grandchildren would just catch it by osmosis. We taught church attendance, which is good, but we didn't consistently teach robust personal discipleship. We taught morality, which is vital, but we didn't always teach the grand, beautiful, redemptive story behind it. We taught religion with its rules and rituals, but we didn't consistently nurture a deep, living relationship with God himself.
And like Israel, we raised a generation that knew about Christianity. They knew the name, they knew some of the traditions, but they didn't really know the God of Christianity in a personal, transformative way. Again, this isn't about blame. It's really important to say that. This isn't about pointing fingers. This is about clarity. Because without clarity, we can't move forward.
And to delve into that generational disconnect even more, I had another really insightful conversation. I spoke with Rev. Dr. James Osei, who's a theologian and a pastor working extensively with young adults in London. He has his finger on the pulse of this generation, you know?
Rev James, when you work with young adults today, especially in a city as diverse and dynamic as London, what do you notice most about their relationship or lack thereof with faith?
You know, what strikes me most is that many of them aren't hostile to faith. They're not actively rejecting it or angry at it, as some older generations might have been. They're simply disconnected from it. For a lot of them, they never saw Christianity lived out authentically in the home. Church wasn't a meaningful, vibrant part of their childhood. It was just something adults did, maybe on a Sunday morning. But it didn't translate into their world, into their daily life, their questions, their struggles. It just didn't connect.
So for them, Christianity isn't something they've rejected after careful consideration. It's simply irrelevant. It never even got a fair hearing.
Exactly. And when faith becomes irrelevant, it's quickly forgotten. It just fades into the background noise. That's precisely what we see in Judges, isn't it? The generation after Joshua didn't hate God. They didn't launch a rebellion against him. They just didn't know him. They forgot him because he wasn't presented as vital, as living, as relational. And that, I truly believe, is the heart of our crisis today in the UK.
That's a powerful and frankly quite sobering parallel. It brings us back to that core idea of neglect over rebellion, the insidious way faith can simply evaporate when not nurtured.
It really does. So, let's bring this full circle. We started with the decline, the stark numbers in the UK, and this ancient story from Judges. And while Judges begins with a decline and is full of some pretty challenging stories, the book is also full of renewal. It's full of these incredible moments where God raises leaders, stirs hearts, restores memory, and brings communities back to himself time and time again.
That's where the hope truly lies, isn't it? It's not just a story of descent, but also of divine intervention and human response.
Absolutely. Israel's story, especially in Judges, tells us three crucial things that I think are so relevant for us today in the UK. First, decline is rarely sudden, it's generational. It's a slow burn, not an explosion. The UK didn't lose its faith overnight. It was a process spanning decades.
Second, forgetfulness is the absolute enemy of spirituality. When the stories aren't told, when the testimonies aren't shared, when the why behind our faith isn't articulated, faith will inevitably disappear. It just gets lost in the noise of daily life.
And third, and this is perhaps the most important point of hope, God always leaves a path back to renewal. Even in the darkest moments of Judges, God always raised someone up, always provided a way for his people to remember him and return. And that, my friends, is where our hope is. That's what this entire series is ultimately about.
So let's end today with some practical things you can start thinking about, whether you're a parent, a church leader, a young believer, or just someone wrestling with all of this. What can we actually do?
First, we need to rebuild Christian memory. This means telling the stories of Scripture again, not just as ancient texts, but as living, breathing narratives that shape our identity. Celebrate God's work in your family's history. Share personal testimonies of his faithfulness. Make it real, make it visceral.
Second, reinstate small daily rhythms. It's not about grand gestures, it's about simple, consistent practices. Prayer at meals, even if it's just a short thank you. Bedtime scripture reading with your children. Family discussions about faith, about tough questions, about how God relates to our everyday lives. These small rhythms build spiritual muscles over time.
Third, create spaces for young adults to ask honest questions. Not lecture halls where they're just expected to absorb information, but true dialogues. Places where doubt isn't shunned but explored. Where they can voice their confusion, their skepticism, their hopes, and feel genuinely heard and respected.
And fourth, we need to reconnect church and home. Church shouldn't be just an event you attend once a week. It should be seen and function as an extension of family discipleship, supporting it, resourcing it, affirming it. The home is the primary incubator of faith, and the church should be its strongest ally.
And finally, number 5, and this perhaps underpins all the others, pay attention. Really pay attention. To your own faith, to the faith of your family, to the spiritual health of those around you. Because the biggest killer of faith is not doubt, not hostility, not rebellion. It's neglect. It's simply not paying attention until it's too late.
That's such a powerful way to put it. It's a wake-up call, really.
All right, friends, that wraps up episode 1 of our series, Where Did We Go Wrong? Today we laid the foundation. We looked at the data, the history, the biblical parallels, and the generational disconnect that brought us to this point in the UK. We faced the truth head on and hopefully found the seeds of hope embedded in it.
It's a lot to chew on, but it's a necessary conversation, and I appreciate the honesty you've brought to it.
Thanks, but next week we dig even deeper into the book of Judges itself. We'll look at the actual cycle Israel fell into, that cycle of apostasy, oppression, crying out to God, and then deliverance, and how surprisingly the UK is following almost the exact same pattern. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. It's going to be incredibly illuminating.
I'm already looking forward to it. Understanding the pattern is the first step to breaking it.
Exactly. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend, your pastor, your small group, or your family. This is a conversation the UK desperately needs to have, and we need to have it together. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you in episode 2.